Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Architecture of Health. I'm Deb Voisin, and this week my guest is Susan Hughes from Irlen, Irlen, Irlen Visions of Chico. Susan is an Irlen diagnostician who helped me and my son understand some sensory issues that were causing a lot of brain stress. And I wanted to share her work with you today so that you learn more about how many beautiful options we have to feel our best. So, Susan, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So, tell us, Irlen Syndrome. I found out about your work from a Bulletproof podcast 10 years ago. You're in Chico, I'm in Santa Cruz. I made an appointment and we drove up. We did this very precise testing to find the exact color that would calm my son's nervous system. And then, of course, we found that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, that I needed some rose colored, literally rose colored glasses. So tell me, how, first of all, what is Irlen syndrome?
Irlen syndrome is a neuroperceptual problem that affects about 1 in 5 people, but most of them don't know they have it. You can have it slightly, moderately, or considerably, and it affects a whole pile of things. It affects light sensitivity. It really affects reading. It can give you headaches and make you fall asleep when you do anything visually stressful, including reading. It can cause learning difficulties. It can make you look as though you have ADHD or dyslexia, and it usually has a light sensitivity factor around it. And the exciting thing about Irlen is it is drug-free. We just use color and absolutely precision color. Very few of my clients have the same color. Um, I have I can cover the page with colored sheets that help, but the very best is to put it on glasses. You can see I'm wearing mine. It actually calms the brain. Um, I think Deb will show you in a minute a picture of a Daniel Amen poster that has a very hot brain. And then with the glasses on, the timing is changed from the back of the retina to the brain, and that brain totally calms down. With my 70 colors, I layer the colors one at a time. And if I get to 7 layers, I have a trillion options of colors I can make, a trillion options. So very, very occasionally, a color is the same as somebody else, usually only with people who are 1 layer, 2 layers, and maybe occasionally a 3 layer. But as soon as you get into the multi-layers, which many of my clients do, you're making a unique color. This color is called Susan, I don't know, it's kind of rosy brown.
My color was a rosy brown, and my son's was very different than mine. His was a deep, almost indigo blue.
Okay, yes. And I find if people are ADHD or they've had brain injuries, their colors tend to be darker the first time they come. But over time, they often get lighter as the brain heals. So it's very exciting work. I love it.
And I heard a few things in there as far as how someone could tell if they would benefit from it. Well, first of all, probably almost all of us could truthfully, because we are in these LED light and fluorescent light environments. We're surrounded by foods that have all these additives banned around the rest of the world. And yet, whether it's a big enough of an issue to require the effort it would take to invest in this procedure, what got you started even? How did you even hear about the Erlin method and what got you started?
I got started in 1988. I was a teacher in an alternative program in Chico, an open classroom school. And I have 6 children, 2 I birthed and 4 I adopted. And I was in a staff meeting and the principal said, there's a lady called Helen Irlen coming to town on Friday, and I'm willing to release 2 teachers to go for the day. And she is going to talk about Irlen syndrome. And I raised my hand and said, what's Irlen syndrome? And he started describing my oldest son, who was now 20. And he had been very bewildering to me because he was an incredibly bright boy. And he wasn't a wild child. He was good. He tried hard. And I even had him reading a little bit before he went to school. He was an early talker. He just seemed like this really bright child. But by third grade, he hated reading. He could read, but he hated it. Now, many people can't even read, but he just didn't want to read. He loved to be read to. He loved to listen on tape, but to actually read himself was very stressful. So I said, I volunteer. And off I went. And Helen Irlen, who is the founder of this, had just done an extensive study, a 4-year study in Long Beach State University to find a cure for dyslexia in adults. And she'd done a very systematic study of everything that was out there. And the thing, she interviewed 1,500 people at the college between the age of 18 and 65. And she was a school psychologist, and she always felt we were asking students the wrong questions. So she set out for a cure for reading struggles, nothing else. She felt we were testing people and we could find out what they knew and what they didn't know, but we never found out why. So she was looking for the why. And she tried all the different systems out there, all the ones that neurologists and psychologists and psychiatrists and ophthalmologists try. And then she was trying all the alternative things out there. She tried things like brain gym, vision training, where they do all the eye exercises, the crawling theories,
craniosacral.
Sacral, that's the word I was trying to come up with. All of these things. And some of these things really did help the muscles of the eye get a little stronger, but nothing stopped the things that were happening on the page. And she discovered that people were seeing a page that was way too bright, gave them headaches, or made them nauseous to even look at. Words that moved, words that haloed or shadowed, white patterns through the words, words that faded out, disappeared, came back, faded out, pulsed, all kinds of things. She's got pictures of 12 different distortions, and I have people sit in my office and identify 4 of them or 6 of them. And very occasionally, I just recently had a young man, he identified every single distortion, and he has been identified with every problem in the book. I've got his story here. I'll share with you in a minute. But anyway, you can have it in all kinds of ways. And no 2 people are identical. But frequently, they're the students in the classroom who aren't behaving because they'd rather be bad than stupid, and they feel stupid. And so they either daydream, or they socialize with their friends, or they get in trouble. They're the ones who are outside the door. The teachers put them out again because they're disrupting the class, because they can't learn with all this going on in their brain. Many of them have their whole world moving, the real severe ones, and it just isn't settled down. So
this is a great moment to reflect on the heuristic or the guideline in general for healing, is you need to decrease the stressors so that the body has the space, the body and the brain has the space to heal. Kind of like I've made the analogy before on this show. When you put on the bandage, it's creating an environment so that more bad stuff isn't coming in, so that your body can then use its resources wisely. So all these resources, these kids' brains are already taxed, and adults, right? Our brains are already so taxed. To add one more thing to it, and then you can't perform. And when I visited you, I was surprised that even one of the simplest interventions you showed was one of the tests back then, at least 10 years ago, was sliding these different colors, just these plastic films, sliding them over the text could for get rid of the halos. And some of those, I'll put an image in here as well from your website. Some of these kids are seeing these basically tornadoes, these spiraling, twisting, crazy things when they're trying to read. And there's no way for the teacher to really tell what this person's experience is like. But you, Helen Irlen, has made a system out of this to be very precise to what dampens the stress. So you're saying, when kids, at least one symptom is they're acting out, or they've been diagnosed with ADHD, or they hate reading even though they're smart. I remember you said there are some other physical symptoms, some other ways physically people might be trying to manage this stress that would also flag, oh, we might want to check this out.
Yes, definitely. I took Owen that I went and trained that weekend to be a screener, and I screened my oldest son, and he had it very severely. And so I drove him all the way down to Long Beach from Northern California, and we discovered that he saw two letters, and around the two letters it spun. So we read a little spinning thing that moved, which if two letters are still and all the rest of the letters spin, it means that those letters are going to change places. Now, here he was, 20 years old. He had dropped out of college after 3 months because he could no longer he had ways of faking it in high school. He became a drama whiz, so he could be Oberon, and he could he great memory. In fact, they put him in the gifted program because of his math skills. But he could get away with not having to do much reading in high school because he could take the drama classes. And when he got to college, he couldn't do that. And he got totally stressed by college. And I said to him, Owen, you have never mentioned to me that you would spin. How come you've reached this age? And he said, Mom, I looked at everyone's paper. They were all doing it. He didn't tell me because he thought that's what we were all seeing. Kids do not share their distortion. They don't realize they're seeing distortions. They think they're just dumb because everyone else is reading and they're not. So that was a big eye-opener for me as a teacher, to know that what my students were seeing was most probably not what I was seeing. And we needed to discover that. So it was very exciting.
Oh, go ahead. Your youngest?
It runs in families, and my youngest son, who was my other birth child, you can see I have this too. I was told when he was in upper grades, he was lazy, poorly motivated, and not working to potential. He could do the work. He was really smart, but he just did, and he wasn't a behavior problem, but he just didn't. He always did minimum. I put the glasses on him when he was 14. They were a deep turquoise. He thought he was a cool dude who was allowed to go to junior high in sunglasses. 6 months later, they put him in the gifted classes. He now has an engineering degree and a master's in engineering and is doing fabulously. His 3 children all have this, and he's got one right now in college to be in some kind of engineer. His middle son is working on an engineering master's degree right now.
Wow.
They all have this. So anyway, I'll let Deb say some things.
Well, I'm tempted. Maybe while you're talking next, I'll go grab my lenses. That just brings so much possibility, right? To transform someone who's being judged and feeling so bad about themselves and give them just that little boost they need. I have a few questions about, that like you said, in high school, or if you get certain accommodations in junior high, you can get so far without having to command the reading. Now that everything is on screens, Are things getting worse or better?
Frequently, it can be a little better for some because they figure kids figure out how to modify this computer screen. They dim the screens and things like that. So it can be a little bit better. But I also work with a lot of people who can't go near a computer. They can't stand looking at a screen. The very severe people. Dr. Daniel Amen thought this was a terrible scam, and he set out to prove that it was a scam. And he had a 16-year-old boy in his office, and the mother said the glasses had made such a huge difference. So he said, I'll show you. And this picture is on my website right in the front. He had the boy take his glasses off, and he did a brain. He injects a dye into a vein, and then he can photograph the cerebral fluid in the brain. And he photographed this boy's brain without the glasses on, and it was so much pressure. The brain was so hot. He said, this is your son's problem. Those glasses are just your hokum. And he said, let me prove it to you. And he had the boy put the glasses on, and he redid the brain scan, and the brain was way more calm. And it was not what he was expecting to see. So he, over the years, has tested many more people who are in Irlen lenses and found a consistent pattern of the brain getting so much calmer. Now we have a lot of good research, although they still print online that there's no peer-reviewed research. We have a lot. This is now in 46 or 47 countries. And it's also many of the people who are diagnosticians in these countries travel to other countries. For instance, the lady in India travels to Indonesia and many other Asian countries quite near her. The guy in Austria travels to Germany and France and other countries around. So it's all over the world. And there's a lot of studies being done, particularly in Australia, New Zealand, and in Europe, as well as US. It's in South America. It's a lot of people in Canada. It's getting common in some places where people still say, oh, there's no good research. I'm not going near it in here. If you go online looking for research, know you're going to find a few of these fraud things in among the good ones. Keep going till you find the good ones. But I was at the Irlen International Conference this summer in Long Beach, and we used to have conferences every 2 or 3 years in different countries, but after the pandemic they stopped. And I've been to Manchester, England, I've been to Auckland, New Zealand, I've been to Boston, been to Vancouver. They have conferences. They had one in Brazil. I didn't get there, but and they've had them in many other countries over the years. But this one was in Long Beach. There were representatives from 17 different countries and 32 states in that room. But there's a lot of countries there, and they were well represented by Irlen diagnosticians. It's in Egypt, it's in Ghana, it's in South Africa. So,
It's around the world. And I wanted to hop in about that, the Google issue. Anytime something really works that's not a drug and it's not a surgical intervention, there are very powerful agencies that hire armies of people to control the narrative. That they have the American Medical Association has staff that will instantly update a Wikipedia article that is, if the article is saying something natural works, they'll instantly flag it as a scam or rewrite it. So that's one reason shows like mine exist, is that the narrative can no longer be controlled by just a couple of central agencies if we're all sharing with each other what actually works. And I saw for myself in the testing the difference in my own eyes. And I've always loved to read. I was a bookworm. You couldn't stop me from reading. So I would have never understood that this was until my son had such an amplified issue. Now, one other thing that you said is that Helen Irlen spent all that time trying researching method after method after method that tries to organize the sensory system. We've talked about some of those on this shows, like original strength. We talked about the sensory processing disorders and how you can organize your sensory system through crawling and your eyes and your foot pressure, brain gym, crossing the midline of the body. And one of my future guests is also craniosacral. I've been through all these things, and I had no idea that she had already done all that research to figure out what worked the best. That is a gem for any person out there knowing that things could be more peaceful. That saves a lot of us. I call myself like a nerd. I call myself a citizen scientist. That saves a lot of us citizen scientists a lot of time. So, what were you going to say,
I
Susan?
um it was a 4-year project, and she tried everything out there, and it wasn't until someone gave her a pair of red and green glasses, the kind you wear to 3D movies, and a red sheet of plastic that she hit on it. She started off interviewing 1,500 people, and then she chose 35 of them to be in her study, 35 with the most diverse and multitudinous symptoms, people who already had migraines, whose words did it, all kinds of things. She had them in her group, and each one of them went through all these different things she was trying, and they did what they were supposed, what they were told to do. They did the eye exercises, they ate the right foods, all this thing. And it wasn't until that, and this was way into the project, that she tried this thing with the red and green glasses and the red. One person in that room of 35 said, "My words stopped moving." And they gathered around her and everyone tried. It did not help one other person in the room. We discovered it was the red overlay that stopped the words moving. It wasn't anything to do with the glasses that time. But it made her think maybe color has something to do with it. And by the time she came back for the next meeting, she had found different colors of plastic all over the town and brought them and passed them around and realized she was onto something. And from then on, she worked with color scientists. And initially, they just came up with 5 colors of sheets of plastic. They now have 10. And with those 10, you can make more than 300 colors, because there's a shiny side and a dark side. You can layer them. I had 2 different people who once layered the turquoise 7 layers before it. Most people are 1 or 2 and occasionally 3 layers of the color, but you can mix and match, and you can do shiny and matte and make a lot of variety. But when you put them on here, the whole world calms.
On your eyes.
Yes.
Yes.
But this calms a book. This calms the whole world, including. So it's, I've had people. I once tested a gastroenterologist. He was very skeptical when he arrived, and he came into the room and he said, "I'm here because one of my students was wearing your glasses." And I asked them about them, and he said, "Well, my page ripples, and these glasses hold the words still." And he said, "Well, my page ripples. Maybe I should go see." And he was out to prove that I wasn't going to help him. And anyway, after about half an hour, his page no longer rippled. The colors we had found stopped the page rippling. And we were doing glasses for him then. And we got colors till couldn't believe it. It was so calm. He went out. I took him outside to see what the world was like. And he stood there and he got really teary. And he said, "I have always been told I have supervision. I'm like a 2010 or 2015. But he said, I've never felt like I had supervision. They would tell, every time I go to the eye doctors, you don't need us, you have supervision." Well, he said, now I'm holding these glasses up. I realize my entire world has been rippling. And now I can see it still. I feel like I have supervision.
Wow, I need to dig into that. The whole world, because I remember during our session, I don't know how you demonstrated it to me, but it only became obvious after we got my color that my whole life, my depth perception had been off a couple of inches.
Mhm.
Like that my and and then it made so much sense. I was the last kid picked on the softball team. I was too clumsy to play the ball sports. I avoided any hand-eye coordination thing. And my son to this day says how terrible of a parker I am. Like I'm so afraid of getting another car anywhere close to mine because I cannot tell how close I am to that. And no wonder I pick African dance too. You're nowhere close to anybody else. You have plenty of space to dance. So I'm going to get, well, not only do I need to get my glasses out, I stopped wearing them in part because I know I don't use progressive lenses anymore. It'd be simpler now to get just a flat, you know, just flat so that and I honestly I worked at Amazon on the Kindle for a while where it's a very matte screen and you can make the letters giant. So and with the world so much being on video, I haven't had that direct, but I want to reacquire that, like you said, that gastroenterologist's feeling of the whole world changing for him. And imagine, wow, those kids who are already suffering so much stress, just that get a taste. And that's what I found actually some of my greatest uh, findings in this journey to know there's a way to feel better. Sometimes even the thing doesn't work forever, but you get a taste like, like I know it could be that good because I felt it. Like I had some hip problems this year and it hurt to walk and then I would do something until I found this like, oh, juicy. Walking is supposed to feel delicious and juicy. I would get that for a minute and it was enough to keep me going just to know that it's out there somewhere. So you just telling everyone
Need
that
to
there's
reset
a
your color.
yes, yes. And so let's talk about the mechanics of this a little bit. But one of them being respect yourself. If you find a need to dim lights and you find a need to wear caps or hoodies, respect yourself and respect that in other people. That's actually they're taking care of themselves. It's not an aggressive. It's not a being aggressive or weird to someone else. So, but let's go into the next layer of let's say and well, one layer you already talked about is if there are these overlays that some reading teachers could probably be using or students, but there's so little done on paper these days. So let's go next to the glasses. And I know what it was like 10 years ago, but how much time and money is calming the world down?
Well, the I do train teachers on not just teachers, psychologists, uh, therapists, uh, school nurses. I train a lot of people in education psychology or related health fields to be able to screen and use the colored overlays with students and college students, and with sometimes they work with adult support and even there. But when Helen did this, it was as a cure for reading struggles. But people, and they got it so that they could do it with the glasses. That was the next step, and it takes several hours to find the right color. But initially, it was only reading. But people started coming back and saying, "My migraines have stopped. I don't get headaches anymore. I'm not falling asleep when I read anymore. My eyes don't hurt anymore." And then we started helping lots of people with headaches and migraines. Fine at reading, but they have constant headaches and migraines. We have tremendous success. One of my most severe examples was a woman who came and she had a migraine. She had a hemiplegic migraine. For 13 years, she'd had a migraine that never stopped, even at night. She would wake up in the night. She tried meds. She tried all kinds of therapies. She'd even had a little surgery in the brain stem where they tried to deaden a nerve, but they could not stop these migraines. And she said the only thing they found is a tiny little tumor in my brain, and it's inoperable. And I said, well, Irlen lenses will not help tumors. She said, you helped my son, and I want to see what you can do. She left my office without a headache for the first time in 13 years. A few months later, I was doing a training for screeners, and she was a teacher. And she came back to take the training so she could be a screener and help people, wearing her lovely glasses. And the rest of the class looked at her and said, how many headaches have you had since you got the glasses? She said, zero, and I'm off all my meds. Every so often, she lives in Nevada somewhere, and not in Reno, but in one of the towns in northern Nevada. And every couple of years, she comes down, has her glasses adjusted with color, because the color can fade. Your brain can change if you have any kind of injury, or certain meds can mess with your brain. And over time, or if you fall, then we've discovered we can help people who have mood disorders. Anxiety, it brings anxiety way down. It's calming. It helps brain injuries. That is the most exciting work I've ever done. People come in who've been injured for so long with a concussion or some kind of brain injury, and we can help them and get them back in the world. And I have lots of examples if you want to hear them. But anyway,
Wow, I want to dig into that because I know my ex-husband and my son both had brain injuries, and now craniosacral, I saw a measurable shift, but the story, even my craniosacral therapist, she became one because she had fallen from a second story roof or something and smashed her head. And the medical institute, they were like, well, you're just kind of going to be an a-hole the rest of your life. You're going to have this an inability to regulate your emotions. You're just this is the way you are. And she, part of the way she got into craniosacral is she found she didn't have to settle for that. But this sounds like an even more direct route because 24 hours a day you're getting, or no, you're getting that calming of the whole world so much of the time. So tell me one of those head injury stories.
I somebody gave me this beautiful little book they made for me as a gift, and it's called Irlen Queen. But I thought, how shall I use it? Do I want to waste it on a journal? I journal all the time. But I decided I'm going to write up all my most severe clients. So I've not got very far because I'm going back, but any new ones. So this person is a man called John, and I'm going to read what I wrote. Today I work with a 54-year-old man who lives in his truck. Oh, by the way, I have a scholarship program, Irlen Ambassadors. We raise money and we pay all the lab fees, because the lab fees can be anything from 175 to 253 to get the glasses made up, depending on what part we're doing. And I can modify my own fee, and the people all over the country have different fees. And if you're in cities, it's going to be more expensive because office rental and all that stuff is more expensive there. I am blessed because I can use the room in my garage remodel, so I don't have to pay to rent extra things. So I keep my.
And let's pause here because this makes sense. So it's whatever the cost. If you go buy your glasses somewhere, if they're a prescription or just sunglasses or something, they have to be made to certain specs so that they don't have coatings and such that'll interfere. And that was tricky because the glasses places weren't following my lead very well, but we got it worked out. Then you go get your screening. You spend the several hours getting your exact color in person, right? It's only in person. Yeah. And then they take the glasses that you brought with the new
I mail,
coating.
I mail them to the lab.
She mails them to the lab. So you're paying for the initial cost of whatever glasses you get, which doesn't have to be that much. Then you're paying for the testing, and then the lab fees you said are a couple of $100s. Then you get the glasses, and then how often do you recommend people follow up?
Well, we recommend every year, but most people don't come every year. They come when the glasses stop working as well, when they faded too much, or something's happened in their life that's caused their color to change a little. I have some people that regularly show up yearly, and I have some that come back every 2 or maybe even 3 years. And some people like you who've been 10 years and really need to come back.
I do, especially because well, two things happened. One is I got a lot healthier. I started to get in the sun every day, put my feet in the ground. All sorts of, my thyroid, my eyebrows are growing back. I got onto this simplicity kick and simplifying everything about my life. But I had toxic mold exposure last year and I had fungal pneumonia, and I can tell I'm not the same as I'm not as cleaned up as I was.
I work with people with toxic mold. One of the things is we don't say we're this wonderful pill or thing, and you only have to do, we say we're a piece of the puzzle. Some people were a big piece, were part of a piece. For instance, we know that 1/3 of all people labeled ADHD or dyslexic really have severe Irlen, but another third have both. They can have dyslexia and Irlen. They can have ADHD and Irlen. So we can change it that way. But you had a question before I read you about John.
I guess just to summarize, there's a time investment to travel to a diagnostician, and then there's a half a day time investment, and so I don't know. The money is probably somewhere between, and like you said, there's a range because you're doing it out of your garage. That's one reason my costs when I help people realign themselves through movement, my costs are lower because I do it out of the place I live as well to keep it real. And you said there are scholarships, and we're still talking, I don't know, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $700 to $1,200, don't you think?
For most people who are in offices in cities, that's more likely. The most mine has got to is for a single pair of frames. Some people come and want 1 or 2 or 3 made. That will always up the price. But if you're doing 1 pair of glasses and the testing, the full cost is about 500.
Oh, geez, I got to drive to see you ASAP.
For recheck, it's cheaper because I don't charge as much for rechecks.
And you know what? Now that my beautiful son Sebastian, he's 6'2", he's not allergic to anything. In fact, the other day someone met him, and he was just so calm. He's like, "Hi," and they were like, "What?" Because I tell the people about all the ticks and allergies and the whiplashes and they can't believe how calm he's become. Now, are we done yet? No, I'm now that we're talking college, the stresses of college, which he's going to next year. Some like I have to say now in retrospect, once I went to college, I started acting out, and who knows what was really going on there without being able to test. Now, one thing too, your website, people can start with a simple self-test there to see if this would help them. But keep going, whatever's next.
Okay. Well, I'll read you John's story since I've hinted at it. Today I work with a 54-year-old man who lives in his truck. My Chico is about 15, 20 miles from Paradise, which was the town that was totally burnt out.
Fire.
And, he finds a place each night up in Paradise on different vacant lots. There's a lot of vacant lots up there. He was burned out of a small rental during the fire. He says he can fix everything, but he was excited that he just got a job in a hardware store ordering electrical supplies. He spent all his schooling in special education and was very oppositional in school, got in trouble a lot, but he managed to scrape by with a graduation and went into the military Desert Storm for 4 years. He always struggled to see well, and the page was too bright. And while he was in Desert Storm, he had to drive through the desert in a sandstorm, and he was blinded by the sand. After that, His eyes could tolerate no light, and he wore wrapped sunglasses all the time. His eyes constantly hurt. He had headaches and migraines every time he read. He came to see me because his new job caused him to need to look up parts on the computer, and it was giving him very bad headaches. We gradually added more and more layers, and he got to 6 layers, and he was totally out of pain. He could see clearly. His glasses were extremely dark, but he was living in sunglasses anyway. However, he saw clearly. He could see in bright fluorescent lights and had 0 to 1 level of pain. When I had him look at a star in the middle of the page, he could see the entire page. Without his glasses, he looked at the page with his eyes shut. He said he could see through his eyelashes. The whole page was a bright blur. He was really pleased, and he can have the glasses because I can give him a scholarship that will pay all the lab fees. I love how this works so well, even though clients are so severe. I have sometimes are so severe I have to test them over their sunglasses. And I do 3 colors of layers, and then I can remove the sunglasses. And my own story is that I was an early reader. I was reading at the age of 3. They let me in a kindergarten. I was raised in Wales, and they had a little country school near me. And reading was my biggest love. I read and read and read. All I ever asked for holiday, Christmases and birthdays were books. I used to go to the library once a week and borrow really thick ones so I'd have enough to get me through the week of reading. But I was always very, very clumsy. Now I know my depth is always off. I started having, I broke my nose in one fall. I started having really bad accidents at the age of 2.5. And even now, as an older lady, I've got to be so careful because I'm quick to fall. But 10 years ago, I discovered that I used to drive all around Nevada and Oregon testing people, and I used to get very sleepy at the wheel. So I would pull off and try and rest. And one day I left Reno and I had to go to Ely, Nevada, which is a 5-hour drive. And the last 3 hours, they call it the loneliest road in the world. I'm sure there are lonelier roads in the world, or it's definitely the loneliest road in northern Nevada. So I was going to drive down this road, and I'd only got about 20 minutes, and I started to nod, and it was 9 in the morning. So I pulled off to try and sleep. I couldn't sleep. I got back on, drove 5 more minutes, start nodding, pulled off. And I remembered that when I played with my lenses, the light green made me feel more awake. It made me feel like my eyes were more open. So I clipped the light green on my glasses, and I drove all the way to Ely without falling asleep. So I thought, okay, these could save my life.
What's so interesting about this science of color is that so much of our visual environment used to be all these natural colors, this spectrum. Now that humans, at least in industrialized countries, spend 93% of our days indoors, we're getting exposed primarily to artificial light, and there's less and less. Incandescents have a more calming frequency of color than the fluorescents and the LEDs that have these rapid blinks that are asking your brain all the time to redraw, and the stress of that, partially, I want to say, is that as we also expose ourselves to these just incredible ranges of color that you find outdoors, and when you are able to take a look out on the horizon and just the behavior of the dance of the light and the color and the feeling of being in nature. So this sounds like, I mean, I don't know who is listening who would not be sold that they should give this a shake. I mean, I'm definitely about ready to hop in my car and go right now, except I want to take my son with me. So let's and just FYI. So I remember one of the recommendations was incandescent lights when possible, natural light when possible. And yet California pretty much banned the use of incandescent lights. They mandated LEDs, so I'm going to smuggle some incandescent lights in. Hopefully in coming years as the powers that be change, it'll be easier to be natural. So let's wrap this up by saying how can how can people find you or other Irlen practitioners in the world?
If you go to Irlen.com, which is the website of the big Irlen Institute in Long Beach, there's a place saying find a screener or diagnostician near you, and you can click on that, and you can click your places in the world or which state you're in and which town you're in, and you will find the nearest person to you. You don't always have someone near you, but many people travel. As I trained people to be screeners, I'm certainly hoping one of them eventually will step up and replace me, because I'm 82 and I'm still doing it, but I'm not traveling anymore. There is someone in the South Bay, that's the nearest next, and there's someone in somewhere around Springfield, Oregon. There's nobody in Nevada right now, nobody in Sacramento. There's as many people need Irlen as need regular glasses. So we need a lot more diagnosticians out there, but you have to have a master's or a PhD in psychology, education, or related health fields to be able to study to be a diagnostician. To be a screener, you just need to be at the BA level. Well, that's fine. So any teacher who is motivated could train. I get a lot of special ed teachers. I get a lot of therapists, all kinds of therapists. I get chiropractors, school nurses, all kinds of people who run little tutoring centers. Well, I told you that, but lots of people. And to find me, you can look at irlenvisions.com, and that is my website. Also, if you go to the big website, they will tell you where people are training and whether they're live trainings or Zoom training. And lately I'm doing Zoom trainings, which means I've picked up people in little remote. I train from way different time zones, but we work it out so that we're both awake to do it.
Got it. All right. Well, Susan, you'll be hearing from me. That is for sure. And I wanted to thank you very much for being on the Architecture of Health. This is exactly the kind of agency that we have to really get a different look at our world, literally making your environment more peaceful in unexpected and practical ways. And definitely the Irlen system is one of those tools that I will never forget.
All kinds of different illnesses that I help. I help people with MS, seizures. I just worked with a young woman with spina bifida. I worked with I can't remember the names of all of them, but many illnesses. Diabetes, anything where there's a light sensitivity part, it's worth testing, or a headachy part, it's worth testing. We're part of the puzzle.
Wow. Wow, that's fun. And the puzzle, the heuristic again being anything that creates peace and calm lets your body use the energy wisely to solve other problems. So, all right. Well, I'm so glad to see you. I'll see you again. That's Susan Hughes out of Chico, California. Irlenvisions.com is where you can take the self-test, where you can reach Susan, and then Irlen.com if you're not in California and you want to look for other practitioners around the world. All right. Well, I'm going to go get my rose-colored glasses right now, Susan.
Okay. I'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye. Bye.